my endeavors now, as I'm writing up the full curriculum of our Wisdom Institute, I'm laboring to say, uh, according to some, but for sure according to me, that wisdom actually includes having a moral compass, which, as has been pointed out, that's not true in the Jewish tradition, depending on how the term is used. I'll give you an example. You may know about the dilemma of whether one can, in the ancient times, whether one can blow a shofar on Rosh Hashanah. Some of you may or may not be aware of that. And the question was, is blowing the shofar milacha, work, or is it a chokhmah, a skill? So even when you look at the building of the Mishkan, the word chokhmah probably does not mean a kind of a sage intelligence of knowing what to do with your life, but it might mean some really well-developed manual skill, techne, as they would say in Greek. So you even have in Greek different translations of words, and some have a more technological aspect, and some more have a grasp of the world aspect. So I've had a dilemma when I teach wisdom. Do I bring in that fear of sin, or even meaning being Yareh Shamayim, which in the Proverbs is understood to be the foundation of wisdom. The foundation of wisdom is Yirat Shamayim, the reverence for the divine. And even Yareh Sin even brings the idea of the being in awe, fear, reverence of sin. Reverence does not work here, but it has a very similar thing, meaning you're looking at something. If you look at sin, why is there awe? It can completely destroy your life. Some thought in the back of your head, something that percolates out from the shadow and takes over your consciousness, can be catastrophic. Now, everybody in a 12-step program knows how catastrophic sin will be if we mean sin, not just an offense against God, or an offense against another person, but I love the idea of alienation from one's authentic self. So what happens in the shadow, of course, is all the parts of ourselves that we don't admit to seeing. From a Jungian perspective, he's made a kind of a toxic pond in the corner of consciousness. Everything is pushed there, and it's saying, don't look here, don't look here, don't look here. And of course, from Jung's perspective, that's exactly where you're supposed to look in some aspects of your spiritual practice. You need to look into the shadow, into the toxic pond, where all of the repressed images and desires and so forth are stored, so that we don't have a toxic leak. It leaks into the unconscious ego self, and suddenly you find yourself with a motivation, within an ideation that you know is not you, meaning the self that we cultivate over the years, the self that we're proud of, the self that wants to do things that are honorable and have integrity, or at least make a living without hurting other people. Something infiltrates and can burst up into consciousness. So part of chokhmah, from my perspective, is also knowing your shadow. Part of chokhmah, from my perspective, is knowing what to do. You might say intelligence is knowing about things. Chokhmah for means knowing what to do, including all the things you know about, including what you know about yourself. So when you look at your shadow, there's not reverence in the sense of wanting to model it or emulate it, but there is a kind of an awe where you look at parts of yourself and you say to yourself, that can or has completely taken me off track because I wasn't aware of it, and it infiltrated. So that's where now I do not teach these things in the beginning of wisdom work, because I want to make wisdom work. I want to have a low ramp for folks who have never studied wisdom. Because if I were to say the beginning of wisdom is reverence for God, or the beginning of wisdom is fear of sin, I'd lose 95% of the people, because they don't like the word God. And if they don't like the word God, how much the more so do they not like the word sin? Now, but I wait until I discuss the 4 C's, no criticizing, complaining, condemning, escalating conflict. And I make a rational case for it. It's not good for you, not good for other people. It can destroy a relationship in an instant. Belittling other people can destroy their sense of self. It can really harm children, destroy relationships. I make a strong case for the 4Cs in the first few classes. And roughly people sign on. And then I say, whenever I get through the first part of the course, it's usually by the end of the second session. Then I say, okay, is everybody in? No 4Cs? Right? Say, yeah, Rabbi, you've made a case, no 4Cs. I wait till the next session. How'd it go, everybody? Chagrined, shamefaced. I couldn't hold on. And people say, I don't understand. How can I be so consciously clear about the worth, the goodness of something? How can I be so clear about my own motivation, my own will, put an honor code before myself, and at some mild provocation, I'm violating my honor code? Well, introduction to the shadow, introduction to the power, the draw to do things that violate our honor code. Now, anger is so natural. For example, anger is so natural. Criticizing people, for some people, is so natural. The other side is being defensive, but we'll stay on the anger part. It is so natural. It's such a deeply ingrained habit that people have to be confronted with this for them to understand the power of it. And sometimes they work on, not repressing, pushing it into the shadow. Some people say suppressing. If by that they mean restraining, that's fine. But it's interesting that one of the unspoken goals of wisdom work is to introduce you to your shadow. Because if you don't know your shadow, you cannot grow deeply in wisdom or any kind of complete human maturation. Now we go back to Balak, Bilam. A few things to say there. I want to say a few things just about our things you may have not noticed in our parsha. So you can file this under cool things about the parsha. Okay, so first cool thing about the parsha is chapter 23, verse 3. Now you have to be a Hebrew reader to get this one, but once you see it, if you're a Hebrew reader, you're going to really like it. Verse 23, it says, verse 3, Vayomer Bilam leBalak. Bilam says to Balak, Hityatzev al olatecha, stand there by the fire offering you're going to make. Ve'elcha, and I'll go. Ulai yikare Adonai likrati. Ulai yikare Adonai likrati. Now, what is yikare? Well, the shorish of yikare is kuf resh he. Kara means to happen. Now, this solves a problem not to the liking of anybody who cares about the truth of the Hebrew language as opposed to tradition. Anybody who knows the book of Leviticus called Vayikra in Hebrew, there's a small olive. Why is there a small olive? In my opinion, there was actually no letter there in the beginning. There was no olive. And it wasn't Vayikra, God called. It's Vayikre, God happened upon. So I think the early editors of the Torah said that cannot be, that Moshe went into the Ohel Moed and God just happened to be there. That was so far beyond their understanding. He said it has to be God called. So you find a tiny olive. Why is that tiny olive there? In my opinion, because the scribes put it there. Even though there are other times in the Bible where it actually does say, and people bumped into God. They randomly happened upon God. They couldn't draw God down, and they were waiting, and God showed up. That's what the sense of yikare with a hey or kara means to happen. So for the Hebrew scholars among us, you can store that. You might agree or disagree, but it's a great question. And one last thing I want to pull out for you under cool things about the Parsha, putting aside Francis the Talking Mule, which we may have a lot more to say about tomorrow. You'll find in chapter 23, at the end of verse 23, Uh, I'll go after the Etnachta. There is no magic in Israel. At this time, at this time, it will be said to Jacob about Israel, Ma Pa'al El, Ma Pa'al El. End of chapter 23, verse 23. Anybody has their Bible open? What are the last few words in Numbers chapter 23, verse 23? Anybody have an old translation? Have it open? What hath God wrought? What hath God wrought? Okay. All students of American history, the first thing telegraphed, as far as I recall.
Morse code.
Morse, Samuel Morse. First thing he coded out was exactly from this Torah portion. Ma Pa'al El, what hath God wrought? So you may be at a party and someone mentions the invention of the telegraph. And someone said, why did he type out, what hath God wrought? Where is that from? And you say, well, it happens that I know who said it first. Okay. Who said it? Bilam. And you can get into the story of the talking mule. No, I want to go directly to that. Very, very much in the same line as has been understood tonight. The Torah, this is the best joke in the Torah, I have to say. The talking snake is not such a joke because, it's a hidden door in the house on Haunted Hill. That's how I see the so-called Garden of Eden story. There's a lot of darkness there. Well, this is just a pure joke. And if you've never read the Parsha, number one, and number two, if we can move from radio, where all we can hear are words, to television and actually see this, try to imagine, you're watching this where Bilam says, yeah, I'll only say what God wants. Thank you for the room full of silver and gold. And he's on his donkey and he has a big smile on his face. He just made a really great commission. No downside to that. He's on his donkey going out toward the Israelites. And suddenly there's an angel with a fiery sword right in front of him. And that angel is getting ready to slice and dice. And Bilam is walking right into him. And the donkey all of a sudden sees it and it goes to the side. Right. And Bilam says, what are you doing? I'm on my way to make my commission. And the angel comes closer and closer and closer, and the donkey goes further and further off. What does Bilam do? He begins to beat the donkey. He beats the donkey. And finally, the donkey turns to him and says, why are you beating me? I've been a loyal donkey for a long time. You don't think I've married? And this conversation breaks out. And first of all, you're not expecting it. It's like seeing the first episode of Francis the Talking Mule or its descendant, Mr. Ed. I watched the Francis the Talking Mule movies when I was a kid. They're pretty good movies. They're so good they actually made several sequels. I used to love watching Mr. Ed. Of course, the first time Mr. Ed talks, it's really a great joke. And not surprising that animals talk. In fact, one of my absolute favorite cartoon is The Far Side, which brings to life the inner life of animals consistently. And of course, the conceit of The Far Side is animals talk, animals think, animals plot, animals have their own wars on with each other. They have their own interaction with human beings. Well, I never opened The Far Side. I said, animals can't talk. In The Far Side, animals talk, okay, as in our Torah portion. So, of course, the joke is the donkey knows more than the human. The donkey knows more than the human. Now, why does the donkey know more than human? Back to our theme. Bilam has said clearly, I will only do what God says. I will only say what God says. As I wrote in my overview of teaching, Balak is banking on the idea that Bilam will conveniently misunderstand God. Okay? So Balak is assuming, is resting the idea, counting on the idea that God will speak to Bilam, but Bilam will misunderstand it. Now, how many of you have had this experience? You talk to somebody and you're super clear about what's going to happen next, what we agree upon. and they don't do it. And they don't say, I'm so sorry, I committed to it, and something blank happened and I didn't. What do people say instead? Oh, there was a misunderstanding. Never heard that? Hope you never said it. Probably did, but don't do it anymore. So, when I was a nicer person, I would say, oh, okay. And then I became not a nice person. And I would say, what exactly was the misunderstanding? Did I not say these words? Just for the record, please, didn't I say these words? Yes. Well, you misunderstood me. I said, didn't you say yes? I say, yes, but it was a misunderstanding. I would say, pray tell, what exactly was the misunderstanding? And of course, what comes out is the person said yes, but meant no. Now, this is one of the most common things about people in 12-step programs, and it's actually a huge spiritual achievement when an addict can say, part of my addiction has me say yes, but mean no. Now, why are people in 12-step programs, why is it such a key behavior of many people in 12-step programs is saying yes, but meaning no? There's no misunderstanding. In fact, saying, oh, it was a misunderstanding is just further evidence of the addiction. Why is that such a commonplace behavior? Because one thing that people in 12-step programs have in common is the need for approval. Their lives feel so bad. Remember, people abuse drugs and alcohol or any other kind of addiction because they feel bad. I've had people say to me, why does my child drink? Because they're miserable. You didn't get that memo? Well, how does drinking help? It helps in the short term because they don't know how to become happy in the long term. And so when parents say to me, well, how do I help my kid? I always say wisdom in the largest sense, because I believe a wise parent who raises a child with wisdom can raise a child with insight and all the things I've been talking about these past weeks, including resilience, including the ability to feel misery and not avoid it. The ability to feel misery and not avoid it, to go through it, because on the other side of misery, of course, is well-being. On the other side of misery is wisdom and happiness. Well, there are people who do not know how to suffer misery, and one thing they do is they abuse drugs and alcohol instead, or engage in any kind of other behavior that is avoidant behavior. So Bilam, he's filled with, although he probably is a prophet of God, one of these people that, the Holy Spirit is downloaded into him and he says things that are true. The idea of either honor, fame, or money has got into his head. Balak knows the human condition well enough to know that Bilam will misunderstand what God has said. Okay? So I want you to think for a moment. Anytime you know a truth, but misunderstanding the truth is to your advantage, that is a behavior that addicts engage in because they don't want to be miserable. And for Bilam in the very beginning, where Balak says, hey, how much would I have to pay you to not say what God says? And, can I give you $100? And Bilam says, absolutely not. He says, can I give you $1 million? And Bilam starts to think about it. And he says, well, for $1 million, yeah, so then why not $10? Because now we both know who you are. You're a liar, not a prophet. It's just the price we're talking about. Now try to imagine Bilam says, mister, you can give me $1 billion, you give me $1 trillion. I'm a prophet of God. And with the title prophet of God comes a range of behavior. It doesn't matter what you offer me. Now, if you offer peace in the Middle East, maybe you should take it. But any monetary gain, forget about it. So that leads me to part of my topic. My topic for tomorrow is actually an expanded version of this. What leads a person who knows something to be true, but the truth, to act on the truth will make you maybe not miserable, but not fulfilled? Going into some setting, we can already feel yourself defensive or hostile, whatever's going on. and you know you're not in your center, and something else, some other motivation is driving you other than being an authentic human being, which you know is my stand-in for reverence for God, because that's we just don't know what that means when a person says, I've turned my life over to God. I really don't know what that means, because I'm still in here. And if I say I turn my life over to God, there's some interface between me and God. And the me is the aspect of myself that can interface with God. So if I can interface with God, I probably wouldn't drink anyway. So it's a completely mysterious idea to me. I mean, I'm not saying we can't talk about mystery, but not efficiently. I like to focus on the idea there's something called the authentic self. There's something called the truth about yourself, the truth in the moment, what it means to be just and fair and courageous. And I believe it takes a lot of inner work to cultivate that knowledge, to cultivate that space. Sometimes when you need that moment the most, you don't have it because you have not forged a channel into your own authenticity. So when the channel needs to flow with the waters of truth, they're just not there because you haven't done that preparatory work. It's one reason I'm such a strong believer in daily spiritual practice. The day you need to be a person of truth, you might not be ready because you haven't forged that path to the truth so that it can flow up when you're ready. So I think of Bilam as a person who has this really incredible ability. He's like Picasso. He doesn't, Picasso didn't train to become Picasso. He just was Picasso. I understand. He was not a very good human being because he had to do with his art. But let's say you're Picasso, but you also want to be a good human being, right? Now you might say, I don't have to be a human being because I'm Picasso. Let's say we all have to be Picasso. So you want to be able to channel that. So when Balak is talking to Bilam, here's my reconstruction. He says, are you sure you can't do it? I'll give you a great price. And Bilam says, yeah, but I got to do what God says. Try to imagine Bilam could detect in himself the embryonic motivation to misunderstand God. He could feel it in himself. There's something in me already born where I know I'm not going to do the true thing. I'm not going to be the truth, do the true thing. Some temptation is going to come upon me where some part of the shadow is going to leak out and take over consciousness. Now, one reason I'm sharing this with you, I've shared this many times, is kind of eerie. When I was working at the drug and alcohol rehab center, one of the guys in the groups was a gambler, and very, very destructive. I'm sorry. He was a thief. And I said to him, uh, 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 the last thing happened. He stole something in the afternoon, like 4 o'clock in the afternoon, because I really want to get the details. I said to him, what time of the day did you know that you're going to steal? He said, about 9 in the morning. About 9 in the morning. He said, I could feel something come up in me that said, I have to steal today. At 9 in the morning, he knew he would be stealing by 4 in the afternoon. So I think with Bilam, at 9 in the morning, he knew he'd be misunderstanding God by 4 in the afternoon. Okay? Now, who is the donkey? Okay, now I'm going to analogize the whole thing. Was one of the worst ways to interpret any literature is to make it into analogies, but I'll go ahead and do that. The analogy of the donkey is a part of yourself, which is the honor code, which doesn't claim to wisdom. It just claims to honor. And it says, no, absolutely not. No rationalizing, no thinking, no reasoning. It's just no. That's the donkey. As stubborn as a donkey, it's just no. Now, that's a huge achievement, to have a donkey inside of you that can just say no, because it's your honor code. And you might want to beat your honor code. You may want to fire your honor code. Honor code says, I'm a donkey. I'm not going anywhere, but I'm just going to tell you the answer is no. And then what opens up? That might have been the moment where the violating of your honor code could have had catastrophic consequences. Every day we read in the papers of some person who's reached some high degree of responsibility and a sudden failure that can destroy your life. And you say to yourself, how could a person arrive at such a great place of power? And it's usually more power, more fame, sex, money, something where their shadow said, today's the day to violate the honor code. And they were not as blessed as Bilam to have a talking donkey. So my prayer for all of you, find your talking donkey, feed your talking donkey, brush your talking donkey, talk to your talking donkey, so that the day your donkey needs to talk and help you not do it, you'll say, thank you, donkey, so much, because what was right over that hill might have been a furious angel of God with a flaming sword. All right, that's my talk for tonight. I have a part B for tomorrow, and I'll see you all then. Hey, first of all, so great seeing you. So Roland, you're up here on my screen, and Shanti right there, and Mel right over there, and Joy, and let's see, Deirdre with a happy little puppy. Great to see you. Claudia, where's your dog? Your dog really loves you. I was seeing a little bit earlier. Let's say Allison and Andy right there, Rabbi Manning, of course. Thank you. Diane and David. Let's see, I'm going to put my spectacles on. Hey, Randy and Dev, good to see you. Ruth, Helena, Roberta, Gilbert and Laura, and I see many wonderful, recognizable names. All right, so good Shabbos to all of you. I will be signing off. Yosh will leave the room open so we can all schmooze and hang out. And I'll be back on at 9 a.m. Los Angeles time, 7 p.m. Israel time. Mirav and Abigail both send blessings, love, and Shabbat Shalom. This virus is really killing them. Did I forget something?
But can I, excuse me, can I just make one remark?
Yeah, please do, of course.
So I'm thinking of people who you think have everything and they die by suicide. And this is a very, very common thing.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a very deep thing that I want us to talk about, because oftentimes the person who has everything cannot admit to their brokenness, because the having everything is a finely, carefully constructed persona.
Yeah.
And it's very difficult to admit to the world, I'm a sinner, I'm frail. Leonard, please forgive me for saying this. Leonard Cohen would never commit suicide, because the whole world knew he was a fraud. He said, I'm a fraud. I'm a sinner. I'm not a good man. I'm just a poet, right? And I write about my sinfulness. Well, that guy's going to live. But thank you so much for that. That cultivating the perfect life oftentimes hides a powerful shadow filled with deep, deep self-loathing. I want to put just one little end on this that for me has a bit of a Bilam feel. So Mirav and I have spoken to many Israelis, especially a wave of people, intellectual secular Jews, who are considering leaving the country. And Mirav and I are just stunned and stupefied and hurt by it. We said, what's going on? They said, well, the Haredim are multiplying, and we're projecting that in whatever 30, 40 years, they're going to be half the country. I said, well, what are they going to do to you? You think they're going to take over the school system? And they said, oh, no, it's not that. Because if we all stayed, what we're afraid of is these people are a bunch of freeloaders. They don't serve in the army. They're paid enormous stipends to study. They're going to be a drain on the economy, and they're going to bring the country down. They're just going to use all of us for their own purposes, and they'll destroy the country. And we don't want to be part of that. Yeah, we get it. We get it.
Sounds like Balak.
Right? Yeah. Fill out the metaphor. Balak in what way?
Sees the people as a threat to whatever it is that he's protecting.
Yeah, coming from fear. Exactly, coming from fear. And by the way, one of the reasons the Haredim don't want to serve in the army is from fear. that if the sons join the army, they'll become secular and they'll lose their culture. So both sides are coming from fear. One is fear of the freeloaders, and the other one is the fear you're going to destroy our cultures. Like, you get Navajos joining the army. They might not come back to the reservation. So a lot of fear. So here's something I don't say often, but I'll say to you. And again, I'm speaking purely as a practical person. There are three centrist parties in Israel. Yesh Atid, there's a future. Osma Yehudi, they call the National Sovereignty Party, and the Likud, the traditional center-right party. Take out the head of the Likud party. Just forget. Let's pretend we don't know this person's name. There are three centrist parties who have a supermajority in the Knesset. Now, if they dropped personalities and three centrist parties made a government, they could rule the country to the point that they could think of a thoughtful way to get people off of welfare who can work, get people into the army who should go into the army, and not let a small group of people have a stranglehold on the country because these three centrist parties can't make a coalition together. If you look at the platforms of the three centrist parties, Yesh Atid, headed by Yair Lapid, Osma Yehudit, headed by Benny Gantz, and the Likud party, I won't say who heads that party. Those three parties, if they got together, and again, there are almost no doctrinal differences, many of the problems the country faces now actually could be faced. Why won't they come together? Personalities. So Mirav and I have talked this, every angle we can, and it really comes down to, I will not join a government with that person, even though from a policy perspective, we agree on 99%. I hate that person so much. I would rather see the country destroyed than make a government with that person. Now, Mirav and I see this, but what I believe what I'm saying is true. We see this and we're horrified that something is more important than the well-being of the country, and that is hatred. So, again, as with many things in life, the depths of decency and honor and truth and spiritual concerns can address issues that seem impermeable to reason until one begins to reason morally. Okay, we'll put a pin in that. I'll come back to another time. We'll see what kind of traction we can get as we try to spread that message. Michael and Jean, I do see a hand up.
Hey, can you shed any light on the drone that exploded in Tel Aviv?
Sure. It was about a mile from us. We didn't hear it. It was early in the morning. The light is, they were tracking it for a long time. I think for 9 hours. It came from, it looks like Houthis or Iran, and then wove around across the Mediterranean and came in on a direct line. Sorry to say, human error. And what do I know that to be? I know enough about Israeli intelligence. Oftentimes, something is given to one person, says, you track this thing. And somebody notified, the intelligence has to notify somebody who notifies the air defense. Something broke down in the chain. And it's, we're horrified by it until you look at your place of work. Do people forget? Yes. Do people misunderstand orders? Do people take a bathroom break at the exact wrong time? Happens all the time. But if it's the military and if it's a missile, it's catastrophic. Now, in your line of work, it might not be catastrophic if you miss something essential. So that is the consensus in the newspapers. It's not a plot. It's not some high level of government. I mean, all the newspapers are agreeing. There's some Israeli soldier that did not do his or her job, and somebody died.
We had the same thing on Saturday evening.
Yeah,
Unbelievable.
You multiply this, and that seems to be the consensus, the tragic consensus of October 7th. So there's a huge national awakening and reckoning. But I want to go to end on a positive side. So I recently talked to a person, and they said, if you were going to make a movie about October 7th, what would the movie be like? And I said it would begin with HaKoncepsia, the conception there's going to be peace with Hamas, that put everybody to sleep, had a kind of a soporific effect. Everybody took a sleeping pill, including having a dance festival on the border with Hamas to show young people, showing how much they believed in peace, and the army on low alert because we believe in peace with Hamas. That's the beginning. The second thing is the army wasn't ready, but thousands of people ran to the sound of gunfire. They called their friends. It's happening now. Get your gun and come down here. How did they get fought off? Not because the army was organized, because people like you and me, people who actually fought in the War of Independence, people in their 90s, and this is attested, still had their uniform, reasonably fit, got in their car, got their rifle, and ran down there. That's the movie. Now, after that, of course, there's the incredible heroism and technical skill of the Israeli army fighting in Gaza. I think this is the best army that Israel has ever fielded, maybe the best army that the world has ever fielded. But the movie is about people like you and me who ran to the sound of gunfire. Okay? And they had enough similar training that once 6, 8, 10 people got together, they more or less knew what to do because they trained in these things. They just had to pick who was the sergeant, who was the corporal. But that's the movie. And the person I was talking says, we agree. The setting is HaKoncepsia, the idea there's going to be peace. And then it happens. People pick up their cell phones and says, get down here right now. People drop whatever they're doing. They grabbed a gun or found a gun and went down there. And there's 48 hours of horrible fighting. It could have been much worse had Israeli civilians and soldiers dropped everything and ran to the sound of gunfire.